Record before. Cool. All right. Okay, I can. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our University of California Application Advice webinar. Today, myself and Katia will be here talking to you about, general advice for the UC application, kind of getting the full breakdown of what goes into that application, as well as scholarships, which I know both of those things are definitely on your mind if you're applying to the UCs this time of year. As you may know, the UC filing period opened in the beginning of November and it goes till the end of November. So this is prime time for you to get prepared for those applications. So thanks for joining us today. And I hope that you find this really useful. So just on our agenda today, to get started, first, we'll introduce our study hall college consulting team. So Katia and myself will give a little bit of an introduction about our experiences, our background, and then we'll get into our services. As study hall college consulting, we'll talk to you about what we offer in terms of essay review and college consulting calls, so you can get the most out of that if you want to connect with us. Then we'll dive into the main ideas for today. First, the in-depth UC application advice breakdown with myself, and then Katia will take it away with how to fund college, so largely surrounding scholarships. And then we'll go into questions for our team. So at the end, you'll have some time to ask us any questions that you want, and we'll have some final remarks at the end of the webinar to wrap everything up. And just wanted to mention as well, for anyone joining us live, if you attend this webinar to the end, you will get 10% off of your next study hall college consulting purchase, whether that's an essay or review or consulting call service. So thanks for joining us again, and we will get started. So first, a little bit about myself. My name is Sarah, and I went to UC Berkeley. I graduated in the class of 2020. My major was architecture, and my minor was Spanish language and literature. And right now, I work as a client success manager at M-Train, which is a workplace culture training firm, and they do kind of like unconscious bias and workplace harassment training. My hometown is Lafayette, California, so that's where I lived when I was applying to college. And then my college involvement, while I was at UC Berkeley, I was an environmental design ambassador, which is specifically for the college that I was in, so that sector of campus. And then I was also a campus ambassador and virtual engagement coordinator for the entire campus of UC Berkeley. So when COVID hit and everything like that, we moved all of our tours online, and I got to coordinate all of that for incoming students. I also played club soccer while I was at Cal. And then I started a design collective with my design friends called Designa, when we applied to a bunch of different design competitions and things like that to kind of get our skills moving. And then I also got to study abroad in the Czech Republic during my time in college. I did a summer study abroad program, so can always answer questions about that. When applying to the UCs, I was accepted to UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Davis, UC Santa Cruz, and UC Irvine. And then I also did apply to other smaller private colleges along the West Coast primarily. So that's a little bit about myself. And during the college application process, what I think really set me apart from a lot of other applicants was my essay strength and authenticity. I really focused on putting emotion into those essays and being really authentic when I was talking about, the struggles that I went through and the things that really made me imperfect. And so I think that really helped me stand out, because I'm not just painting this perfect picture of who I would like to be. I came across as really real in that application. And I think that's really important to do. Also, the extracurricular involvement that I focused on, I was really involved outside of school. I always wanted to be busy doing something, whether that was sports or art or theater or something like that. And so that, I think, also really bolstered my application in a different way as well. Community involvement and engagement. I think particularly for Berkeley, that was a huge part of my application. They really value public service. And so that was something that I was really passionate about in high school. And so that kind of fit really well with my application when I was applying to the UCs overall, but particularly Berkeley. And then my letters of recommendation. So I was asked to submit those later on to the UCs. And so that was something that, if they were on the fence about me as an applicant, I think really pushed me over the top, and my colleagues and or my mentors were really able to talk about me really well. And so when I was applying to college, I applied to mainly biology and pre-med programs. So as you can tell, my major was architecture. So I did quite the academic shift while I was in college, but that's what I applied to when I was first going into college. So now I'll let Katia take it away and introduce herself.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Katia. My pronouns are she, her, and I just graduated from UC Berkeley this past spring with the class of 2021. and I studied chemistry in our College of Chemistry. I was also one of UC Berkeley's Regents and Chancellor's scholarship recipients. This is kind of a small pool of students every year that receive this merit-based scholarship. And if you stick around, we'll get and talk about kind of the perks and how you become eligible for that. But this really was the reason I attended Berkeley, because I got the scholarship. Since I graduated, I've basically been taking a gap year, and I'm doing online tutoring on my computer as some remote work. I'm originally from Mountain View, California, which is just an hour south of Berkeley, also in the Bay Area. So I grew up familiar with Berkeley, but never had been physically to the campus. And so I think that was a kind of nice way to get to know it. In college, I was involved with various things. For one, I pursued the Cal Teach program at Berkeley, which is also available at many of the UCs. This is if you're interested in getting into science or STEM education, as something that I might do in the future. I was very active in the environmental community, volunteering, and also doing various jobs for on-campus sustainability. Like Sarah, I was a campus ambassador, so I was basically a tour guide on our campus. I also studied abroad at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and we can talk a little bit about that later. I did dance with ballet folklorico, which is traditional Mexican dancing, and I got to spend some time in the research lab with organic chemistry. So all these are experiences that I think really define my time at UC Berkeley. And overall, I only applied to the UCs when I applied to college as an undergraduate. And so the three I applied to, I got into. And so that was UC Berkeley, UCLA, and UCSB. And I think ways that I was able to stand out during the college process, why this is particularly important, is the Regent Scholarship is something that you're again are kind of hand selected by faculty. So what makes you stand out perhaps as a strong Regents candidate is I did have some significant, hardships in those formative high school years leading right up to the college application process. And so I think being able to eloquently describe those and shape how they made me a better person made me more capable to take on a wonderful institution like these UC schools, really helped me stand out. I also, kind of a lot like Sarah, I had all these different interests, but I was extremely passionate about that and tried not to do things to impress people on a resume, and instead try to do things that I really loved. And I think that really shined through. So whatever it is, your passion, music, sustainability, sports, just pursue that. And that's going to shine through. You don't have to use words to show it when your actions and the time that you've dedicated to that passion shows so much more strongly. And I also took advantage of all the wonderful resources at my school. I did grow up in a really awesome, supportive environment with a lot of things for the college application process. So I took advantage of everything we had at my high school. I applied to chemistry programs when applying to college, and at UC Berkeley, that meant applying to our College of Chemistry.
Awesome. Thank you, Katia. And I hope that gave all of you a good background on who we are and where we're coming from and what kind of advice we can provide to you. So more about our services before we jump into the main kind of meat of our discussion. So Study Hall College Consulting, first and foremost, offers college application essay reviews. So this is one of the things that we offer that you can utilize from us. We will review your common application, supplemental essays. We also review the letter of continued interest if you get on the wait list for your schools, and UC personal insight questions. So that one's kind of the one on your mind right now, those UC personal insight questions. So if you do need help with any of those, you can contact us and get set up with one of our consultants. And we all graduated from UCs. So we have a lot of experience when it comes to writing those essays, editing them, and actually getting into a UC. So how we review essays: definitely holistic yet detailed. So what that means is that we will give a thorough analysis of your story, as well as grammar and vocab, and your thesis. So your thesis and your story, those are really kind of the big picture things that tie your story together. But then a grammar and vocab, that's what really helps you paint an eloquent picture and really sound like you know what you're talking about, and it's really clear to follow in your essay. So really how to present yourself, put your best foot forward, that's what we want to help you with. And we provide paragraph long explanations of how to improve, so you can really get an idea of what we pulled from your essay, what we understood, and how we think you can refine it a little bit more. So we'll give you detailed suggestions that are both subjective and objective. So some of them are our opinion, some of them might be, this is the best way to do it, grammatically. And so you can take those suggestions or leave them. We're just really here to elevate your voice, because ultimately you're the one writing this essay and applying to those colleges. And then aside from that essay review, we do offer college and career coaching calls. So this is where you'd hop on a call with one of our consultants and actually talk face-to-face virtually. You can ask questions or for advice about our high school and college experiences. So what we did in high school, our struggles, kind of what we went through to get to where we are, our college application journey and tips. This is something that is really difficult to get through if you don't have support. And we totally know that from a firsthand experience. And so we want to be that support system for you and kind of walk you through all of the challenges and everything that's confusing about the process. So we can work together to brainstorm essay ideas and create college lists. So really what you're looking for in a college and what would help you be the most successful. And then we can have big picture essay discussions about your personal insight questions or other essays that you're working on. We can help you fill out the extracurricular activities section. So really, list the activities that you've done and find the best way to describe them in in that section. We can talk about our college experience and give you advice about, making your college schedules, getting housing in college, joining clubs, finding internships. So kind of beyond the application process, how to be successful in college afterwards. And then Navi and Katia, two of our consultants on the team, also offer tutoring. So if that's something that you're interested in, kind of getting ready for college in the academic sense, we can offer that to you as well. And also, if you have not purchased our services ever before, we will offer a 15-minute free consultation. And that is just to kind of get to know us, to get to know our personalities and what we can offer you, and then kind of give you more confidence coming into our services. All right, so moving on from there, we're going to jump right into the meat of our discussion. So first and foremost, I'll give you some advice on the UC application. So this will primarily be centered around, what do the UCs look for during the admissions process? What goes into the actual application process? And then those personal insight questions, brainstorming, writing, and editing your essays. So a lot of this will be, a mix of things that you can find on their website. They have the UC website is really extensive, and they actually describe a lot of what they're looking for and all of the components that go into that application. But I'm also going to give you my own advice and my experiences, especially with regards to that essay editing process, because that's something that's hard to find online a lot of the time, kind of those best practices. So to start off, the UC mission and student selection. So their mission, as you can read here, the distinctive mission of the university is to serve society as a center of high learning, providing long-term societal benefits through transmitting advanced knowledge, discovering new knowledge, and functioning as an active working repository of organized knowledge. So as you can tell, the word knowledge pops up a lot here, and especially serve society, that's something that pops up in that first phrase. Those ideas are really what the UCs are dedicated to. So being kind of that community of knowledge, and everyone's bringing their own experiences, regardless of where they came up, where they came from, where they grew up, and what they bring to the table. And so you have students coming from across the world, you have professors coming from across the world, and they're all joining to create this really great educational system. And so that kind of feeds into what they look for students. They're looking for students that have really amazing experiences, really diverse experiences, and can contribute to not only the university, but society as a whole. And so I mentioned earlier on for Berkeley, that was something that I know they were looking for, a dedication to public service. And that goes beyond Berkeley, that goes to the UCs as well. So having a connection with your community. And I won't read these here word for word, but you can see Berkeley and UCLA, they actually spell out what they're looking for. So contributing to their intellectual and cultural community, and kind of going beyond and focusing on their contributions to the state, the nation, the world, really being that agent for change. And we'll get more into what the UCs look for in terms of these traits, but curiosity, leadership, innovation or initiative, and tenacity, those are all things that are looked for in applicants. And those can be found in different ways throughout your application. So a little background into the UC application itself. So all of the UC campuses do share one application. So you're going to be filling out one application for all of these UCs. And that's important to note because in your essays, you want to paint a picture of who you are, but you don't want to start to name drop certain UCs because they're all going to receive those essays. So you want to make sure that, you realize that it's one application for all of those different campuses. There is a $70 fee for each one that you apply to. So that's something to note. There are fee waivers and things like that for that application process, but that's something to note. It can add up. So that's something to be aware of as well. And then an important note that a lot of people wonder, the admission to each UC is considered independently. So that means that if you get into a couple UCs, the other ones are not going to see that and then deny you because of that, because you have other options. It's considered independently. They don't talk to one another. And so you should just apply to the ones that you feel really passionate about. So some important news also, the UCs no longer consider SAT or ACT tests as a factor for admission. So this is something that started during COVID and they are expanding from then. And that is to kind of create equity. And that's something that wasn't accessible to a lot of people during COVID. And you know, it's largely been controversial over the years. So that's one update for the UCs. And then now they still guarantee admission to AUC, if you are a California resident in the top 9% of high school seniors. So AUC, I bolded and underlined that because that's important. It's not a UC of your choice, but it is AUC within the system. So you can see the ones listed to the left, it would be one of those. So that's something to note as you're filling out your application and going through the process. So in terms of what they look for in applicants, the main thing I would say that a lot of UCs look for is that you're challenging yourself academically in high school. So that goes with actually the next point here, you're a top performer relative to your class / available opportunities. So that means that you are not considered in a vacuum. You're considered relative to the opportunities that are available to you. So if you have APs at your school, they're looking for, you know, did you take those APs? Did you take honors classes since you had the chance to do that? Or did you try new things? You know, it's not necessarily taking the hardest class, but really branching out and exploring new opportunities. So that's something they will look for in your experiences. In addition, any special talents, interests, or skills that set you apart. Again, Katia mentioned this before, they're really looking for passionate people about something. You know, it doesn't matter what you're passionate about, if it's a certain kind of art project, or if it's a certain experience that you've had, or traveling, or really anything, that's great. And they want to hear about that because that's what defines you. And so having a passion project can be a way to do that, really putting all of your energy and time outside of school into something that you love and something that you want to make an impact doing. So demonstrated desired impact, that could be your community, that could be just your family, that could be a friend of yours. It doesn't really matter, but kind of having some sort of connection to others around you is a really great characteristic to have. And then academic preparedness, that's huge, and especially for transfer students later on as well. That's something that they're going to look for. Have you taken those required courses beforehand? Are you prepared to really deal with the academic rigor that comes with going to a UC? And that's something that they can tell, you know, throughout your application. They definitely hone in on the fact that it's a holistic review process. So they're looking at everything and, you know, not just random grades in a vacuum. So character-wise, the UCs I mentioned before, they value passion and curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. And so that's something that, again, can be demonstrated in a variety of ways. It doesn't have to be just academic, though they will look for the fact that you're academically prepared. Public service is a big one. So having a desire to impact your community or something beyond yourself. Being a leader or demonstrating leadership capability or potential is also a really huge thing. So you can show that in your essays, you can show that in your activities, a lot of different ways. Perseverance. So particularly if you've gone through a lot, you know, before getting to where you are in high school, if you have certain family struggles or certain things that have either set you back or defined who you are, they want to hear about that because that paints a more holistic picture of who you are and what you've fought against to get where you are. And then life experiences. So that really goes along with that last point. So if you have, you know, unique life experiences or something that's really made you change your mind about, you know, a certain opinion or things like that, anything that defines who you are as a person, they really want to hear about. All right, and then going more in depth to kind of the nitty-gritty details of what the UC application entails. So first and foremost, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, the filing period is November 1st through 30th. So there is no early action or early decision. It's during that period for everyone. And then generally people start hearing back in early March or so, sometimes mid-March. Sometimes people will hear back a little bit earlier if they have a certain scholarship, which Katia will get into a little bit later. And so that's the general timeline for filling out your application. It always starts with a general information section. So this is always going to be, you know, what campus you're applying to, what college. So the college would be kind of what program you're interested in and what majors filter into that program. So are you interested in the life sciences? And at Berkeley particularly, it's, you know, the College of Environmental Design, if you're interested in design or chemistry or engineering, that kind of bucket of courses. and major selection, as well as, what term you're applying to. Are you applying for this fall? Are you applying for the spring or next fall? You have to, specify that. UC specific scholarship eligibility. So this is something where you're going to check all the boxes based on, who you are and your characteristics and your experiences, or your identity. That's a better word to describe that. And then personal and family information. So that will be your income and your parents, kind of their education status and everything like that. And then it goes on to your academic history and optional comments. So the A through G requirements, that's something that most high schools do actually fulfill, but that's kind of your basic requirements when it comes to, 2 years of history during high school, 4 years of English, 3 years of mathematics, 2 years of science, 2 years of language other than English, 1 year of visual and performing arts, and 1 year of college prep electives. Don't worry about memorizing that. That's all on their website for you to look at. And again, largely a lot of high school curriculums already include that. And so you'd be eligible to apply, but just so you are aware of those requirements. And then beyond that, academically, they're going to look for, either growth. If you received some lower grades earlier on in high school, did you improve since then? They're going to love that trajectory of growth. Are you doing well, kind of getting above C's normally? Is there a pattern? They're going to look for all of those academic records as well that you're going to submit. And then activities and awards. So this is really where you get to flesh out who you are as a person and show the admissions team who you are more than tell them, which the essays, you can paint a picture of who you are and really put it to words, but these activities and the time frame in which you've been involved in them is really going to show who you are. So you're going to list your extracurriculars or anything that you're really passionate about. It could be, a structured extracurricular with your school, with another community organization. It could be just yourself. If you worked on a passion project and really were a self-starter, you can put that here as well. And any awards that you got, if you were, the most valuable player on your soccer team, or you got a certain history award, or even a spelling bee, things like that, you can put that in the award section. Test scores, as I mentioned, for the UC, one of the biggest updates is the SAT and ACT not being required for application, but that's something to note as well. And then personal insight questions, that's going to be something we'll talk about in a moment, but those are going to be really where you can talk about who you are and get more in detail. And so those, I would say, can really sway an application. So spend the most time on those personal insight questions, but definitely don't forget all of the details above here, because those are also really important in painting a holistic picture of who you are. And then the end, sometimes letters of recommendation. So this is something that you should not submit the first time, especially, since they are not required in the first submission and they do not ask for them, they will not read them. You don't want to be sending documents that they didn't ask for, but they may come back to you later on and ask for those letters of recommendation. And so that's something that happened for me. If that happens, definitely send them. I would say they can only help you. Generally you get to pick who writes these letters. And if your mentors really are looking out for you, they're going to have some great words to say about you. So it's going to help your application later on. All right. And then essay writing tips. So now we'll dive into the essays, and this is going to start with kind of a holistic idea of what you should look for when you're writing your essays. And this can apply to more than just the personal insight questions, but we're going to start out with these. So keep in mind, as you're writing your essays, you want to tell a story, and you want to show more than you tell this story, and you want to keep it centered around you. So what I mean by that is that telling your story can be listing out things that you did and describing them in chronological order of then I did this and then I did this. That's fine. You're going to show them exactly, or you're going to tell them exactly what you've been doing, but it's not going to be as compelling as if you were to show them through memories or through stories that really can be symbolic of those ideas. So, picking memories of when you were a child, something that was really formative in your early years can be a great way to show, a certain characteristic that you want to come across in that essay. And so like maybe why you're so interested in community service. Maybe there's a memory that you have from a child that really pushed you to be involved as a high schooler. So something like that, and then keep it centered around you. So when you're talking about events that may not be exactly about you, but that happened around you, you can always connect it back to yourself by describing how you felt about that situation or what that made you do. If you witnessed something in your life that was really life-changing, then what did you do with that? Where did you take it, and how has that impacted your life since then? And so you're keeping it centered around you and your growth and what has contributed to who you are today. You want to be honest and vulnerable as well. So I'd say that's the biggest thing that I think really helped my essays. Don't be afraid of imperfection. If you struggle with certain things, whether it's, mental health or certain things that have been in your life, if you feel comfortable putting that in an essay, don't worry about it. They're not going to judge you for being an imperfect person. That kind of paints a picture of who you are overall, because nobody's perfect going into college. And so recognizing that and using those moments as ways to grow and ways to kind of show who you are can be really powerful. And so, for instance, in my application, something that I struggled with a lot was my confidence. And I loved playing baseball. And I wrote my essay about how I was heartbroken when I could no longer play baseball as a girl at the time, as a young woman. And so that was something that was so emotional for me, because it was this, this sexism that I was fighting against, and that was really hard for me to be confident against. But that whole struggle, I think, really painted a picture of how I deal with adversity as a young child and growing up in the world. And so that's just one way to take it. But I think that emotion really helps in conveying your story. In addition, you want to do your research. So when you're applying to UCs, definitely look at the mission statements of each UC. What are they most well known for? What is the community like? You can talk to current students. What are the biggest things about Berkeley, about UCLA, Santa Cruz? And then you can bring those up, in your essays and when you're talking about yourself. Are you really dedicated to nature? Is that something you're really, or conservation? Is that something you're really interested in? Does that align with another UC's mission? Things like that. Iterate. I would say every time you write your essay, you're going to want to do multiple versions. And so that goes without saying. You're going to edit a lot of times, and we'll get into some tips for that. But also don't be afraid to ask for help. So that goes, for asking us as study hall college consulting. That goes for asking your parents, if your parents are around to help you, if you have friends or siblings, or free resources that you can find at your high school. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Help always helps, regardless of who it's from. You can take it or leave it when it comes to their suggestions. Oops. And then I wanted to mention, generally, most of the prompts that you're going to come across, they're asking the same thing. So they're going to ask you in different ways who you are, what are your most defining characteristics, and what has made you that way. And so, they're going to prompt you to think about kind of different memories in your life, but just think about how they're all really trying to get at the fact that they want to know who you are. And so with that being said, since they're all kind of asking similar questions, they can be used as brainstorming strategies. So when you're looking at all of the UC questions, as well as all of your other college application questions, you can use those other prompts as practice, because they can help you kind of figure out different memories that you could use to really describe yourself, or different experiences, or different, defining characteristics that really are a big part of who you are. You can create a resume or portfolio. A lot of colleges have you submit that anyway in a document. And so this could be a great way to prepare. Really listing out your accomplishments is a great way to remember them yourself and to feel more confident about what you've done in the past. I know I still do that. I go over my resume and kind of try to remember what I've done in the past year and how that's contributed to who I am. Additionally, again, ask a friend or family member for help. And so in this sense, for brainstorming, it could be useful to ask them, what comes to mind when you think of me, or what are my top 3 strengths and weaknesses? And so I would say this is something that you can do after you've brainstormed yourself, but having their perspective can really help you find blind spots that you might not think about. Maybe there's a strength that you have that is so important to who you are, but you don't even see it because you're too caught up in your own, if you're insecure about that, or you're just kind of not seeing that part of yourself, that can be a really helpful way to learn more about you. And then I would say list your extracurriculars and associate one meaningful event/story with each one. So this can help you show your experiences more than just tell them. You're not just going to say this happened and this happened, but you can find a really compelling story that paints that picture for the reader. And so that can be also helpful to jog your own memory. A lot has happened in your life up until now. And so this can be a really great exercise for you. And then describe the person you want to be. So a lot of times this helps me because it helps me set goals about what I want to do with my life. Obviously that always changes, but what helps now is that, you might realize that a lot of those characteristics that you're striving to be, you already are, or you're finding ways to pursue right now. And so that can help you learn a lot more about yourself and again, establish confidence during the process. And then lastly, I would say, like I said, ask for help. So schedule a call with us. We are more than happy to walk through these brainstorming strategies to help you through the process. And then once you have an idea, really take it from the beginning to the end. So help you edit and really extensively and find the best way to paint that picture. All right, and then editing. When it comes to editing, so maybe you've written your first several drafts and you're really trying to think about the strength of your essay. So you want to ask yourself the following questions. First, what is my thesis? What's the big picture takeaway I want to give my reader? What's the point of this essay? Do you want them to know that you are passionate about community service? Do you want them to know that you grew up in a really in a low income household and that faced you with a lot of challenges that you've overcome and it's made you who you are today? You really want to find the main idea of what your story is trying to say. You also want to think, is this essay about me? Is it too much about someone else? Is it too much about something that happened outside of your life that you're just kind of describing? Or do you successfully, relate it to yourself and to your own growth trajectory? Are you answering the prompt? That's a big one. I would say that's the number one common mistake that people make when they're answering these questions. They kind of get distracted and they start talking about something that doesn't necessarily answer the prompt. So feel free to, in your first brainstorming exercise, just kind of word vomit, put everything on the page, but then afterwards, make sure that you're centering it around that initial question. And then additionally, is this essay providing new information or expanding on something that you put in your activities section? So particularly, later on, if you get waitlisted and you put it in your letter of continued interest, that should be completely new information that was not in your initial application. But when it comes to personal insight questions, this should be something that you're not just repeating from another essay or from another part of your application, but maybe if you have an activity that you've lightly described in that section and you want to talk more about it because it's super important to you, that's great. But you want to just make sure that it's new information, that it helps your essay or helps your application in some way. And then, are there questions left unanswered? So after reading over all of your essays, is there something really important about yourself that you left out that you think is really important to painting the picture of who you are and why you're a good fit for that school? If you have that feeling, that nagging feeling, you might want to kind of revise your essays and figure out ways to put that in there somehow. So those can be really great questions to ask yourself when you're first going through the big picture editing process, which is always the hardest part because that involves sometimes rewriting a lot of it, the whole thing, some phrases, some paragraphs, reorganizing. So this editing process is best done kind of towards the beginning. And then once you've gone through those processes, what's great to do is do kind of last minute edits and looking at your grammar, things like that, because these are the small details that are often missed that really are important in making your ideas clear and making it clear that you write really well and that you know how to communicate your story. So the first one I would say that's really important is spelling. So when it comes to spelling, this can be anything from, random words throughout the essay to particularly the name of programs, the name of the university, the name of certain, admins at that university, if you're maybe writing a letter to someone, which is more the letter of continued interest later on. But that's something to be aware of. You don't want to spell the name of the university wrong. It's happened to all of us. We all do it before, but make sure you catch it before you submit it. Run-on sentences. That's also a big one. You get so caught up in painting really imaginative pictures, using really eloquent words in your phrases. That's great, but then a lot of the times it leads to a run-on sentence that doesn't quite make sense. Maybe you need to put a comma in there to make it work or separate those sentences. That's something to look out for. And reading aloud can also help you figure that out. If there should be a pause or if it seems wrong, you can often catch it reading it aloud. Commas, colons, and semicolon use, that's another really common mistake. Commas, you can look up how to really use them and you can ask us as a team as well. But that's something that, native English speakers and non-native English speakers get wrong all the time. And so that's something to check when you're going over last time. And then verb tense consistency. So this is also something that's often missed. If you're talking about a story in the past tense, the present tense, you want to make sure that you're not just switching back and forth because that can sometimes be confusing in the storytelling process. So you want to make sure that you're staying in the same situation where it really makes sense that you're switching back to a memory or it's very clear that you're doing so during your essay. And then also word choice. This is something that you can always do at the end of the writing process. You can read your essay aloud, if you see that certain words are popping up a lot, you say, for instance, knowledge a bunch of times, you're going to start to hear it in your head, circle those words and find better words to describe that, find synonyms. But also be careful while doing this. You don't want to find words that don't make sense in that context or that you don't really know what the meaning is, because that will stand out and it'll be really clear that it doesn't quite fit in your essay. So you want to make sure that it sounds natural and it flows really naturally towards the end. And then mistranslation. So this is often for non-native English speakers, and we as a team see this all the time, and we really want to help particularly people where English is not your first language, because it's a confusing language. I can say myself, I'm a native speaker. And so there's a lot of things that might not translate super perfectly. And so just, asking a native speaker or just double checking that extra time can really go far, because sometimes maybe there's an article that's missing, or, a certain vocab word that's not quite what you want to say. And so having someone else can read that, to read that can really help as well. All right, and to end this, I had some resources, and we will post this at the end in the description of our recording. So don't worry about not being able to see these right now. But this is where I got a lot of my resources, particularly when it comes to kind of what goes into the application process. I would highly recommend going to the UC admission website, because they have so many resources when it comes to tips, directions, best practices, how to fill out the application, when to start, when to submit it, undocumented students resources particularly, because that can impact the process. So we will post these resources, and I highly recommend looking for them, as well as scheduling a call with myself or my team. We can give you more firsthand experience when it comes to these steps, and also the essay editing process. That's a big one at the end. So thanks for listening, and I'll pass it along to Katia to take it away with scholarships.
Thank you, Sarah, for that super awesome summary of a really kind of big application, which is the UC application. I'm gonna change a little bit and talk a little bit more about financing your UC education and stuff that you can start considering now for scholarships and grants. Cool. So the first thing is, it's actually not too early to start thinking about how you're going to finance your education. And that's because the main federal way to get student aid is with our FAFSA, or free application for financial student aid. And this already opened a month ago on October 1st. So it opened now, and it will be open through June of 2022. That application period will be for the following school year. And this is just because, just kind of like if you think of your taxes, it takes a lot of time to crunch all these complicated numbers. So it's super helpful if you get this done as soon as possible. Myself and basically every student I know that has gone through this process, it's a big headache, and we can help you get through some of that headache as well. But that's why it's super important to start as early as possible. There's a lot of numbers, especially if you've never done your taxes, never done this kind of stuff before. Just super important you get it correct so that you can get as much aid as possible for your kind of financial situation. And so factors that are considered when they finally run kind of the numbers to figure out your financial aid package at your school is, what is your expected family contribution, or EFC? And this is a number at the end that they basically tell you, we expect you to pay X amount of dollars every year for your school. They consider how many other children are in your household, or even other students. So for me personally, there are 2 other students in university at the same time in my own family. And so that definitely weighs on your family's financial situation. And also, what's the cost of attendance at your future campus? Or the reason I put this one in there is every year you are a university student, you have to reapply for the FAFSA. So they'll consider the school you're currently going to and the financial kind of status there. So kinds of aid that can come out of FAFSA is loans. So your school can actually offer you to take out money, which you eventually repay with interest. This is kind of all the different kinds of financial aid, the least preferred one, just because obviously it does involve you having to pay with interest. So at the end of the day, you will be paying more. But if you're in the situation where you just cannot afford to pay your tuition year by year, it is a wonderful option, so that when you finally enter the work world, have a real career, you can slowly pay off your education year by year. A much more convenient method of financial aid is if you're lucky, if you're offered grants. And so 2 of the most popular grants are the Cal Grant and the Pell Grant. Cal Grant is for California residents, and the Pell Grant is for US citizens, basically. And so this you would be considered for if you apply to the FAFSA. You don't have to do anything else. My understanding is that with the UCs, I think the Pell Grant in some cases will cover full tuition. And so while that sounds like, oh my God, you get free college, not quite, because in a lot of our UC schools, we do find that our housing, our textbooks, all of this ends up costing more than the cost of actually attending the school, the tuition. And so unfortunately, this would cut down a huge amount of your college costs, but still it's going to be very costly. Another kind of aid that we have is also work study. So this is kind of a job you get typically on campus, where you your money that you earn basically goes back into repaying and paying off your education. And so you might be wondering kind of what are some scholarships that are available from the UC, especially if you're thinking of applying to the UCs. So these typically do come a little bit later. I'll talk about the timeline in a second, but it's nice if you just hop on the school's financial aid page. You can generally see a scholarship tab there and you'll see different options available. So for example, I know UCLA, UC Berkeley, they have an alumni association that offers thousands of dollars in scholarships every year to students who apply. And there's also a middle class scholarship as well, which is pretty cool if you think about it, because we oftentimes associate scholarship with low income, but that kind of forgets about the middle gap of a lot of people who need extra support to afford college in the middle class. Other grants that you can get. So grants are awesome because they are not taxable, unlike your loans. Is for example, at Berkeley, we have the Fiat Lux grant. At UCLA, there's an achievement grant, and there's other ones that are offered. And I'm mentioning these kind of off by name, but it really does depend. Some of these you can apply for, some of them, your application by applying to the UC, you are automatically eligible. Sarah was talking about kind of checking boxes, super important if you have different identities that you identify with, or especially like minority identities, check as many of those boxes as you like, because these might automatically qualify you for a scholarship pool that would be pretty selective otherwise. And so I mentioned in the beginning that I did get the UC Regent Scholarship at UC Berkeley. All of the UCs do have a Regent Scholarship, but the package looks slightly different at every school. And so more or less, it's a merit-based scholarship. There's a lot of mystery around it because there's not too much talked about. I personally didn't know it existed until I received it from Berkeley. And so typically you are kind of the college readers are able to select a few students that they see as especially strong applicants in the beginning, and they're offered early admission. I believe at all of the UC schools, you automatically get the Regent Scholarship the second you are admitted to the school, and that's now an offer for you if you choose to take it. For UCLA and UC Berkeley, you then have to go and actually go through an interview, in-person interview, where they see from there if they will grant you the scholarship. And the UC Regent Scholarship, what does it mean? It is a big lump sum of money, which is really nice. For some schools, it might be $2,000 a year, for some schools $6,000 a year, and some schools, UCLA and UC Berkeley, will meet up to your full financial need determined on your FAFSA if you get the Regent Scholarship, including all your tuition, all of your housing. However, this does vary from institution to institution. They are not all the same. For example, I think UCSB offers like some lump sum, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 a year. So you really do have to look into it. But on top of that, the Regent Scholarship is nice because it generally is kind of like an honors thing, like that you might see at other schools. So you get like early access to classes and get to choose your schedule sooner. And you're kind of have an additional faculty mentor right away on campus. I don't want to dwell too much on it because you cannot you cannot apply to the scholarship. It's so random. I couldn't tell you exactly why I got it. Of course, if you get it, it's really wonderful, but I think it's nice to know that it's out there and it's a possibility that you might earn the Regent Scholarship if you're a strong applicant. So outside of the UC system, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, sorry, millions or billions of dollars every year that are going out there. For one, this is money that can go towards tuition and sometimes also can go towards housing or textbook expenses. And so I mentioned the second one because for me, with a lot of the FAFSA grants and stuff from my university, I automatically got those to go to my tuition, but I was able to get some outside scholarships that then helped for the thousands of dollars going from my housing and my textbook expenses. So it really, really helps cut down the cost for you. There are scholarships for everybody, whether you have a certain identity, whether you have a certain I don't know, group affiliation. Like for example, I was in the Girl Scouts. If you have a certain income bracket, like low income, especially a certain racial affiliation, or even if you just have really good grades, there's like academic scholarships as well. So there are so many scholarships out there that I wouldn't think that just because of kind of you not having the highest grades or just not because you didn't do like the perfect extracurriculars, that doesn't mean you're not eligible. There's something out there for anyone. There are scholarships that nobody even applies to. So definitely consider this if you want a way to get grants to help fund your college education. And it's a super simple application. I found it really easy because it was almost identical to those college application essays, kind of some of the same format. So kind of just tweak them a little bit, modify them to fit the prompt. And then right away, you're sending off opportunity to get perhaps thousands of dollars as a scholarship. Yeah, I think we can go to the next slide. And so a timeline for this is you can start applying or looking at least to scholarships now. There are some really big national ones that actually have already passed the deadline, October, November, full ride scholarships. Typically those are ones that you would work with a college counselor on one-on-one. If you're interested in getting involved in the scholarship search now, that's something we can definitely help you with because there's so many scholarship engines out there that we can start to explore. I found a lot of luck by actually looking on my local scholarship website, like in my community. There's kind of a community page, and a lot of those have a smaller application pool as opposed to big nationwide scholarships. March and April is generally when you see the application deadline for these, but I mentioned you can start looking now in case you do miss some of the scholarship. Unlike colleges, it's not a hard deadline. It just depends on whatever the organization chooses. May is kind of the time when you commit to a college, and so then you can start looking at scholarships that are actually offered there and kind of weigh that in with your financial offerings as well. For me, I was offered several scholarships to the point where they asked to see my financial package because that might impact if they offered it to me or somebody who has more need. So it's another thing to keep in mind. They're always trying to balance kind of who gets the funds and who needs the funds the most as well. In August and September, it's kind of just keeping in touch with donors, making sure you get your money because it's kind of all up in the air and you want to make sure you secure the award that you earned. Other considerations kind of for financing college is some people think study abroad is this huge expense. Both Sarah and I studied abroad, and especially if you're going through the UC program, it's just really well hashed out, and in a lot of cases, it can be cheaper than living for a semester in Los Angeles or Berkeley. Just the housing cost alone can make it kind of cheaper to study abroad. All of the same tuition and kind of stuff basically goes into the program. And so this is, I think, something that's possible for any student. And there's also more scholarships available as well to fund that. You can apply for additional funding with the cost of attendance adjustment. A lot of students might not be familiar with this, but basically it's a way to get on top of what you're already offered by FAFSA. Let's say your laptop breaks down suddenly. You might be able to apply for a few $1,000s to get a new one. We really want to make sure you're able to attend class and get there on time and however you need. And the last thing I want to say is that the UC school, especially if you're a California resident, might be the cheapest university out there in the world for you. I say this even cheaper than like the California State University CSUs. Oftentimes, since they're not as wealthy universities, they don't even have as much funding to offer as the CSUs. So it's very possible that a UC could be the most economical, best value education you could get out there. So now with that, we just have about 10 minutes left. So we'll transition to some Q&A. I think we have a few questions up here from the chat. Thank you for submitting them. So for Sarah, we got a question, should I apply to every UC with the application? And I guess, how do you choose which ones to apply for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So applying to the UCs with this application, the number that you apply to largely depends on one, your financial status. If you can get aid for those application fees, that can be a big factor because it is $70 per school. So that's a lot. So that's something to think about, as well as could you really see yourself going there? So if you want to apply to all of them and you can really see yourself starting a life at all of those colleges, then great. But I would really encourage you to look at each school because each one is really different, you know, depending on where they are. They have hugely different environments in which you're going to be studying, and that also contributes to their main focuses. So maybe, you know, you like the fact that UC Santa Cruz is really focused on the environment, UC Berkeley really public service oriented. I would love for you to do your research in terms of what really pulls you to those schools emotionally. And so I think that's the biggest thing that got me to think about where I wanted to apply to. One was the location. So I loved the Bay Area, and that's why I really loved applying to Berkeley, because I grew up in the Bay Area. It was my home, and so that really pulled me to stay there. On top of the wider range of different, you know, majors that Berkeley offered, and it was a larger school that I could attend after, you know, going to smaller schools most of my life. So that was something I considered for Berkeley. For UCLA, I applied there because it was somewhere new, and that environment really pulled me there. And I could go down the list to really describe what I looked for in each college. UC Santa Cruz, I think, is one of the most beautiful UCs. I loved the college, the the programs that they had there, because I'm really focused on sustainability. And so a lot of those environmental science programs really drew me in there. So yeah, I would look at those programs, particularly which one draws you in, and then go from there. I would say the list of ones that I applied to too many colleges overall. You don't need to apply to a ton of colleges. I did that a lot based on my own insecurity of not getting in. But I would say, definitely narrow down which colleges you apply to. It will save you a little time and money in doing so. So really do your research ahead of time.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question. How did you choose which of the 4 UC prompts to write about?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So when it comes to these prompts, there are several that you might go through that sound like they're asking the same thing. So what I did is I really looked at each essay. I wrote them down in a Google document, and then I did bullet points for each of the memories that I could think about that would answer that question, what I had to say about each of them. And then I looked at that list and thought, okay, what 4 ones are the most different in terms of hitting all of the aspects of my personality? So looking at one that maybe talked about my extracurricular involvement. And I was definitely involved in a lot of sports. So I played sports year round. So that was something that I really wanted to talk about. And then in another essay, I really wanted to talk about my love for the environment. And so that was something that I really looked for, what could help me bring out that aspect of who I am. And then social justice and community service, that was another one. And so if you have, ideas like that, or maybe you have something about your family that you really want to share, all of those questions give you the chance to touch on all of those topics. So I would really narrow down which one would say the most about you, and which one you have the most kind of material for when doing your initial brainstorming.
Cool. And then I think we have one last question here. Is it possible to get 100% demonstration need at the UCs? So I'm going to interpret this like, is it possible to get full financial aid as an international student? So I'm not totally positive on what the case that would be, but I do know this lesson, this talk was very catered to not just students that are Californian, but also students that are like out of state. And I know it does end up being a very different situation for international students. It's a little bit harder to be eligible for those scholarships. So I would encourage you to kind of seek out the international office at the corresponding UC to see what options are available, because I know there are specific kind of UC international scholarships, but I'm not super confident that it's possible to get kind of a full ride scholarship, at least not at the UCs as an international student, just because we are public institutions, so we have limited funds, and those generally are targeted towards our California students first. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right, and then I know that we had, let's see, we have a little bit of time left, so I wanted to answer some questions that also came in beforehand. So one was, what is one thing you wish you knew before applying to the UC schools? And I just wanted to kind of wrap up on that one, because I think that's a great question to ask when you're going into the process. So for me, when applying to the UC schools, like I mentioned before, each campus is really, really different. And I did some research into which one I was really drawn to based on their specialties. But I definitely wish that I looked more into programs beyond what I was first focused on. So for me, I was really interested in pre-med, biology, public health, things like that. And that was great because I found a lot of really prestigious schools and really prestigious programs within the UCs. However, as you know, my major changed to architecture, and I took Spanish because that was something I fell in love with the language, and I wanted to continue that in college. And those were things that I didn't really look at when I was applying to the UCs. And I was really lucky because I chose UC Berkeley, and it had a really wide range of programs, as most of the UCs do. However, that was something that I figured out once I got there. And so, if you feel like you're really dialed in, you know exactly what you want to do, that's great. But definitely leave yourself some wiggle room, because life will bring you in 1,000 different directions, and you probably will change your major. Some people don't. But give yourself that wiggle room to really kind of like change your mind and figure out what you want to do. Cool. All right. Well, I know that we are coming up on time, and I want to make sure that we don't have any other questions. And it looks like we answered them all. If you do have any questions that pop up later on, definitely feel free to reach out to us. I'll wrap up with some of our additional resources just to let you know what we offer. So, We offer a ton of different free services, and this is one of them, our webinars that we do on a pretty frequent basis. We talk about different topics. We also have an advice blog, and this is something that you can find on our website, and I would highly recommend that you check out. We write blogs really about anything. So it could be some of the ones you see here, breaking down the common application essay prompts. We talk about semester versus quarter systems, or finding research opportunities, or paying for college, a little bit more about what we talked about today. So we have these organized into different categories on our website. I would highly recommend checking them out. And then if you have questions about what we've written, you can always email us or contact us through our website. And you can always suggest blog topics for us to cover. So if you have a question you really want to hear us write about, let us know and we will write about it. So we want to cater to all of you and your questions. We also have a newsletter, and we have a ton of different social media accounts. So if you have Instagram, if you have LinkedIn, if you are on YouTube, Facebook, email, if you want to go to our website, check out these social media links, accounts that we have. It's all linked on our Instagram as well as our website. So you can follow us if you want to. You'll get the most up-to-date information whenever we're doing free events like this. You'll be the first to hear about it, or when we post new blogs, if you sign up for our newsletter on our website. So again, thank you so much for attending. If you stayed till the end, you'll receive 10% off of your next Study Hall College Consulting purchase if you complete this form. So go ahead and type this into your browser and you can complete that form for that discount. And again, I mentioned this before, but this was recorded, so we'll be posting this later on. If you want to rewatch it or you want to send it to one of your friends, it's free. So we want to give this information as widely as possible to anyone that needs it. So please definitely share this. And thank you again for your questions. As I mentioned, if you have more, definitely email us. We will get you answers to your questions, or feel free to book a call with us. We'll talk to you more in depth about any of your questions. But thanks so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day, everyone. All right.